So when you came home last night and you were 45 minutes, over 45 minutes past when I expected you home, past the time we had agreed on, and that I thought you were coming home, I was pretty freaked out. I was pretty scared. I got myself into bed because it was pretty late. And so I got myself in bed and I had my heaty pad and I had my weighted blanket and I set the lights and the fan was on. Like I'd done all the things I do to manage my physical body. And I'd been doing really well while you were away. But then I got in bed and I just felt like I was white knuckling it. And I felt really stuck. I felt scared. I was overwhelmed. And then, but I'd gotten through the time when it was up to when you were supposed to be home. And then the minutes were clicking by. And as the minutes clicked by, I felt more and more, it wasn't just like white knuckling. Now I was getting like angry. I was feeling anger. And I can say it was anger now, but honestly, at the time, it was more like feeling lost and enraged. But like the lost feeling, like I felt really lost because I also felt this like, and this dismissed. I felt thrown away. I felt like I didn't matter.
So what I'm hearing you say is that while I was gone, you were already getting dysregulated.
Yeah.
Before anything, before
you
an
were
agreement
late.
had even come into question,
that's true.
You were already getting dysregulated. And then when I didn't show up when I had agreed that I would, that dysregulation started to magnify, and you started to be to feel very lost, and then angry. And it sounds like there's some scared in there as well.
I did feel scared. Yeah.
And a lot of tension and fear and anger.
Mm-hmm. That's all true.
All right. What else? Did I get that as much as I said?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
And I also was really proud of myself because I had done all the things I said I was going to do to take care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to celebrate that because I did the things and then, then I didn't feel like I could manage anymore. So I was starting to freak out. Okay. And then I was starting to freak out.
So I'm hearing you say that you had started, and then you had started to be dysregulated, and then you dealt with that, and then you found that rather than there being a resolution, it got worse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there more?
This is my opportunity to just tune into my body and find out if there's more. And as I do, I'm noticing that I've got a pit in my stomach and there's something now, like it feels like I can't talk because I don't want to say the next piece. But yeah, so there is something more, which is that when things started to spiral, my thoughts started to spiral and I started to say really mean things to myself in my head. And I was starting to kind of get into one of those loops that we talk about where I'm starting to it feels dangerous.
Okay. So I hear that in addition to the fear and the tension and the feeling of being lost is this internal pattern that you get into of beating yourself up, of self harm, self.
Yeah, I mean, I was taking care of my body. I did a good job. I got into my drills. I was doing I had my Buzzy toothbrush, and I was doing like all of my neurosomatic drills. And I got in the shower which is why you found me in the shower when you came home instead of in bed, because I was like, I'm going to go take a nice hot shower. And that did help, but my thoughts were still
So
spinning.
you were regulating your nervous system as best you could, but you still had these spinning thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
do I have that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there more?
No, that's it.
Okay.
That's what was going on.
So I find myself in the process of that, wanting to weave in empathy into this part of the discussion. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but going too fast, too far too fast can get in the way of the whole
Because you might
process.
miss, if you try to empathize, it might look like you're trying to fix and rush
Right.
me past my story, past my data,
Yeah.
past my share, past the clearing that is. And so by staying with the mirroring
Yeah.
process, you're really sticking right to, this is your experience, and I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm going to be with you in that discomfort. And that is incredibly strong co-regulation right there. So you're showing up for me in the moment.
Because it's worth pointing out that empathizing can turn to soothing, which can feel like a rejection of your feelings. Like,
Right.
oh, let me help you not feel that anymore.
And then too, if I get stuck in my stuff, then I might try to stop you from empathizing, and then now I'm soothing you. And now we've looped.
And now
we missed it. We
we're
missed
not
the
there
thing.
yet.
Nope. So we were doing share and mirror,
share and mirror.
and now we're moving to validate and acknowledge.
So now the speaker has
I feel understood.
feels understood.
Again, you didn't have to agree with me.
Nope.
You could disagree with my facts even, but understand, like, okay, this was your experience. This does not mean that you're agreeing 100%. It doesn't mean that you condone any particular behavior. It doesn't mean that you co-sign how I chose to deal with my stuff.
I could have feelings about, well, why were you getting dysregulated about me being gone when that was part of the agreement? That's not relevant here.
Yeah. So it's really important to stick to the mirroring process and not get into explanation. Again, managing defensiveness and managing to just stay with, I don't have to agree.
Right.
I'm in understandment phase.
You started
Understandment?
You started this by saying that one of your jobs was to speak in I statements and not to assign motivations and feelings to me. I have the same job here. It is not for me to, at this point, be judging or second guessing your experience at all. I mean, it kind of sounds silly to say. Why did you feel that way? Is not a helpful question at this point.
Not right now.
It is only about that you felt it. So
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've mirrored it. You have agreed that I've reflected what you intended to say.
Yeah.
And so now my sentence stems are, that makes sense to me because. Even if it doesn't make sense to you in that situation, like if I were in your position, I might not have felt those things. That's not the kind of sense we're talking about here. The sense is, I understand you well enough to say, that makes sense to me because, for example, I know that my pattern of behavior has left you not totally sure whether you can rely on me and yet still relying on me. So when I
I feel teary even, like, we've worked through this before quite a lot, and I feel teary even having you say that. Because when you said that makes sense to me, I heard you say, like, oh yeah, you're really entering into my reality, my perspective long enough to just let that be. You're playing the as if game.
As if
you were me.
As
if my perspective were valid.
Right.
Which we fall out of when we're in disagreement and disruption.
Conflict can break that. So that makes sense to me because I know that in situations that you can feel abandoned. I know that's a thing that can happen for you, and that is what you were left with. You were not given the company you expected at a time. You were not given the support you expected at a time when you expected it. And so I can understand that you would feel angry, lost, given that, well, I can understand how you would feel angry given that I've done this before. And so I can understand that you would be angry and that you would feel lost given that you had already spent this time regulating, looking forward to a point when you could co-regulate. And you didn't get it.
Yeah, that's true.
Does it feel like I'm hearing you?
Yeah, it does, especially because you were able to point out the pattern that you know. Yeah, that you acknowledge that it is part of a pattern. That feels especially like you saw and heard me.
And so that was right out of the script. Does it feel like I'm hearing you? Very important question. Yes, I've said things. I even think I might be right, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't land for you. Okay, so it does feel like I'm hearing you. You're hearing me. What else do I need to know to understand your perspective?
So if I hadn't felt like you had seen the pattern, now would be when I would bring that up and I would say, yeah, so here's what I would add is that the pattern that we're talking about isn't a pattern of a couple weeks or a couple months. It's a pattern of decades. It's a pattern that goes out back to before you and I were romantically involved, back into our early friendship, back into, my early adulthood, and that I knew you to be a person who did what he wanted when he wanted, and so I could just see how this could maybe go on forever. I could feel the potential for that, and I want to believe that that's not true, but also I could feel it. So yeah, I can feel the intensity of the pattern, and also trying to stay in the moment of just what's real now. Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel, is there more?
No,
Is there anything else?
no, the pattern was the big scary thing, big scary piece.
Okay. So now moving to empathize. So I can imagine that you're feeling disappointed, which may feel even minor compared to the other things that you've described, but I can imagine that there's disappointment in there. If you had been looking forward to my competent return and you didn't get it, that's disappointing. And also, I imagine that you might have felt that sense of hopelessness of, yeah, this pattern will never go away.
Yeah.
And that sounds very disorienting and scary. Is that how you felt?
Yeah, you nailed it on the hopelessness. I got the where the negative self-talk started happening was when it shifted from just like, can I white knuckle it through this time, and feeling like sad, mad, and feeling stuff, and also feeling judgy of myself about like, why can't you do this better? Why aren't you better at this yet? Why haven't, it's been years. Why is this still hard? Into the hopelessness of, I love you, so I'm not it's not like I'm leaving. So there's a hopelessness in thinking like, I guess this is just how it'll be. And that feels a little self-abandoning-y.
Oh, yeah, I see.
And I don't want to do that either. So yeah, there's like a whole story I could spin out into from there. But sticking with the feeling like, yeah, hopeless and disappointed, and yeah, disappointment, but the hopelessness. Thank you for naming that, because I'm not sure I could have put my finger on it even, but that's the core of it.
Is there more?
Thank you for asking that, but I think I'm complete. I think that's all.
And that is a point in the conversation when it it can be hard to ask that question as the listener in a situation like this where I, as the listener, have been hearing things that had very large negative impacts on you.
Mm-hmm.
I might feel like I've heard all I want to hear, but you might not have been able to say everything yet that you needed to say.
Yeah,
And
I'm a high I'm a high context person, so I will keep offering, like I sometimes will keep offering details because I'll like tell you the story and then I'll tell you an like an analogy or a metaphor and then I'll tell you the story again. And that's just because that's how I make sense of my world. I offer a lot of detail. And that might feel like I'm piling on when that's just how I process.
yeah,
And so you staying patient to the fact that I'm explaining in all of these ways is incredible. It's very generous. It feels generous. I feel seen when you're able to stay with that.
okay. And so knowing that about you, because we've had these conversations many, many times, makes the conversation less emotionally fraught for me, which, less dysregulating, I should say, which is to say, the more you do these conversations with someone, the better they go.
So
The more experience you have.
I agree. And here's the thing. Now we're at what might be the hardest part, which is that it's time to switch.
Well, it's not time to switch yet.
Not yet?
Because I have not quite done everything that I want to do as part of this conversation.
What's that?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was late, and I'm sorry that I didn't contact you.
Okay. So you're weaving in apology, which is also taking responsibility for your part.
And we can come back to it, but I feel like right at the tender moments.
Yeah, I think that's great. So here's the thing. I don't see that. And often I feel like the tool, the Imago tool, many restorative conversational tools, they leave you kind of adrift at the end and they're just like, so now apologize, take responsibility and agree. Make new agreements. Like make a new agreement. Like as if that's simple.
That reminds
a lot of
me
us
of
don't
Steve
know
Martin. How to be a millionaire and never pay taxes. First, get $1 million. Then there's a lot to that step.
Yeah, that step is not okay.
Apologize, take accountability.
So we're at that stage of the conversation where it's time to switch, and you felt the impulse to apologize, and if you don't currently have the steps for an apology and accountability letter, if you don't have steps for that right now, I encourage you to get the steps. Like I have a guide. There are lots of guides out there for what a really quality apology looks like. And that's what I mean. At the end of these, the Imago Dialogue of restorative conversations, there's just a lot of times it's just sort of, okay, now like just go handle it. And I want you to have the next step.
There's a whole other set of technologies for that.
Other technologies. Yeah. Apology and accountability ladder is my preference. I like that one. I like then to move into an agreement process. And I have a very specific agreement process I teach in the year of opening and I teach to my private clients. And those are all important. And I don't want to go so far down that before we switch. Right. So I hear your apology.
That's all.
Thank you. I'm not, I think I would just end it there. I would not, rather than get deep into the responsibility steps of the apology ladder, I would offer that we switch. And in order to switch, I actually need to do a little regulation to make some space to hear you share and mirror and for me to mirror. So I'm going to, I'm going to do a little bit of nervous system regulation. I like to stack up my tools. So I am doing a thing that I do with my ankle and a thing that I do with my my eyebrow. And okay, I feel a little bit better. I'm also laughing. Laughing helps. There's a million things. Shake it out.
In the process of listening, I was doing some regulation along the way. At some point on the video, you can see me sticking my tongue in my cheek, which is one of the things that I like to do. And some other things. Yeah, I was regulating along the way. I wasn't just white knuckling it through.
Yeah, nervous system regulation happens on a micro scale very, very quickly. Again, you can go back and listen to whole episodes on that, but you don't have to. It doesn't have to be I go for a 2-hour walk and that's how I regulate. There are things that you can do in situ that take 15 to 35 seconds.
Yep.
There, do them. Okay.
Do 'em.
So I do actually feel ready to switch.
Okay.
So we're going to switch roles.
All right.
So your job now is to stick to I statements.
I statements.
To manage any defensiveness you have, and specifically to manage the fact that you might feel called to respond directly to what I said.
Right.
But your job is to now speak to your experience of what happened last night and to stick to this, to not change the subject to some other thing, and to not slip into excuses, but to speak directly to your experience.
That has been my challenge. Yes. Avoiding the excuses part of this. So, all right. So I was driving home, and the traffic got really bad and really complicated, and I was not. I was definitely not going to contact you while I was driving, and
this is where, just a pause, this is where it would be really easy for me to feel defensive, because it sounds like he's starting to make an excuse. So you could alter that just by prefacing with saying, like, so I'm here and I want to be heard and seen for what happened, and I'm aware that these are not excuses. You could simply enter into it from that perspective.
Yeah,
That's another way to layer in some responsibility for the actions without falling into
right. So
downtroddenness.
And what can help me with that is remembering my goal for this conversation.
Yeah.
What is my goal for this conversation is to maintain and enhance our connection.
Yeah.
That's my goal.
And my goal is to know whether we still have an agreement or whether our agreements need to be changed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if I think about, okay, I'm about to relay my experience of last night, and I want to do it in a way that enhances our connection. And I know that excuses don't do that. And also they're against agreements I have with myself, my own self-accountability. So,
okay. So I hear that, and now go ahead.
Okay.
Dive in.
So I was driving, and I made the decision that I wasn't going to contact you. And
because our agreement is that you will contact me if you're going to be late.
Right. And I decided that that it was not safe in the moment to contact you, and I didn't apply creativity to this circumstance to say, well, let me figure out a way to do that. I just carried on in the moment. My goal was to get home rather than adhere to our agreement. And that has flavors of some of the less responsible members of my inner council coming online and kind of literally taking the wheel. And so rather than solve the problem of how do I keep my agreement with you, I chose some other agreement that I had with myself or with one of my inner council members, and I just decided to push on home.
Can I mirror back so that I don't lose the tracking?
Absolutely.
So I'm hearing that last night you were in traffic, which maybe you hadn't expected, that you felt like it was unsafe then to reach for your phone and to contact me, even though you were aware that you would be late and therefore out of agreement. But you were aware of that, and that you were aware that I'm not sure whether you were aware that you didn't have access to your creativity, or you're just aware of that now. But I hear you being aware of that, and that you are having some feelings about who in you was driving those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing that.
Okay. Yeah. That's, let me just check to make sure I have the listener responses.
I'm the listener right
Oh
now.
yeah, I'm the speaker. Okay. So yes, that's right. And you're calling out the idea that I might be having feelings about the parts. Yes, I do. So I have I have piles of self-judgment around how it went, particularly knowing that, I could feel it being a continuation of a pattern that I've been trying to change. And so I have a bunch of feelings about that.
But last night, what were you feeling specifically? Help me understand.
Last night I was feeling guilt coated with justifications and excuses. Because I can feel now how in the moment I knew I was, well, first of all, supposed to have been home earlier than I was going to be home. And second of all, not doing the things I do when that happens, because of course that can happen sometimes, but I didn't contact you. And so I could feel the parts of me scurrying around trying to shore up my position of having not contacted you, even though I said I would. So
Let me see if I got that. So you feel a blend of feelings, and that now you're noticing is like there was guilt underneath, but last night you were feeling like maybe self-righteous.
That's a good word for it. Yeah.
Like defended and like I have a reason and I get to do this. And this is justifiable.
Yeah.
And
right. Justifiable.
And that you truly felt that, and that you were, and that you didn't feel like you had access to being creative in the moment to meet the needs of the agreement.
Yep.
And that, but I also hear that you're now feeling judgments of yourself for how you were feeling last night. Like you're having meta judgments about yourself.
That is accurate. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything more?
No, I don't think so. No, I feel if there was something more, all of it seems to fall into the bucket of excuses. And
so this is where you manage your defensiveness.
This is where I manage my defensiveness.
And sort out the difference between an excuse and like what your experience actually is.
Okay, there is something more beyond that, which is I came home and saw that you were in the shower instead of in bed, and knew immediately that there was going to be a conflict. And I think it's interesting that I said it that way. There was a conflict. The future had in it me dealing with that conflict. And so I had the avoidant feelings come up that I then had to manage so that I could honor at least the commitment that I have to you, if not the agreement to be on time or let you know, at least the commitment to stand in that with you so that we could work through it. And the avoidant habits and tendencies were like, find a way out.
Okay.
So I had to manage that.
So I'm hearing that when you came home, not only were you already aware of being out of alignment with your agreement, but also you right away were aware that there was conflict present, and that you weren't just out of integrity for yourself or accountability with yourself, but you were also, it sounds like you were aware that you had been, and I want to use this word gently, like that you had been caught, like that you were being seen.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't asleep.
That's a good way of saying it.
You couldn't hide that. And so you had to face in the moment that there would be ramification, right? Like there would be outcome because of this. And you were just feeling
yes.
like, and I'm hearing that maybe even tapped into like old feelings of like overwhelm around what it means to be called in about like, hey,
Yeah.
this is the thing, we're in conflict.
Well, and here we go. So this part of the conversation has just opened up something new for me, which I didn't actually know was going to happen. So I came home, found you in the shower instead of in bed. I had all those feelings about having been caught, that you could see it. Well, why do you think I didn't contact you on the way home? Because I was going to have to face it in that moment. I'm not going to be home in time. If I contact you, I'm going to have to face it right then. And the avoidant tendencies in me wanted to push that off to the future.
Yeah. So I appreciate the meta conversation
Yeah.
you're in now, but I actually think you're taking yourself a little bit in, like now you're into your own. It's not that you're excusing yourself, but you're really getting into your deeper processes
Okay.
rather
So
than
let's come
sticking to
back
your
out and
experience.
into this experience.
And
All
now,
right.
because now it
Good.
would be tempting for me to go into my deeper experience, and now we're down in
Now we're
that,
out
right?
of I left the process.
You left that process for like,
Back to
and
the
not in a
guardrails.
bad way, but in a way that's going to take this and also the conversation is going to swell even further.
Right.
Right. So the guardrails, right? So now
Yep.
I could call you in by saying, hey, we use a soft, safe word for this. So I have an option, and I could have just used it there. I could have said marshmallow. Marshmallow is our soft, safe word, which is just meant to say, hey, I think we're not doing the thing that we mean to be. We're not in this together the way that we mean to
And
be.
I didn't even have to understand, like I didn't notice that I had veered off. You say marshmallow, all I know is, okay, hang on,
Let me check.
something's off. Let me
It's like hitting
check.
those little bumpy lines on the side of the road.
Right.
Like, oh wait,
Yeah.
something's weird.
Oh, okay, hang on then.
And
Thank
you might
for
have
that.
caught it yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was the moment. I also note I want to call myself out because I felt myself, as you were starting to get into that layer of conversation, I felt myself go into my own story about my stuff and all the other things that were going on for me then. And yeah, so it was leading us away from the presence of let's be in what we were feeling and not all of our stories about and our stories about and our stories about, and try to stay in that.
Absolutely.
So I want to move to step 2 then, if you feel complete
I do feel
in
complete.
having shared and been understood.
I do.
And
more,
I don't. Oh,
one
go
more meta point completely outside of this is I think it's a significant contributing factor to that little detour that we just took, is that we're both very tired right now.
We are very
So
tired. It's
keep
true.
in mind that
But we have these
preparation-
conversations when we're tired all the time.
absolutely do.
I mean, we all, like humans do. And
humans do.
so,
keep in
and
mind.
we can't use being tired as
Nope.
the excuse for getting out of all of our conversations, or we would never have them.
But it's one of the things that safe word is good for. It's like,
Yeah.
I think we just went off a little bit. Let's come back on track.
And I call them soft, safe words because they're not designed to stop anything. They're actually designed to be like, oh, let's soften toward each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Step 2.
So step 2 is validate, acknowledge. So my job as the listener is to now, even though like it might feel challenging for me, lean in. Okay, given what I just heard. So that makes sense to me because what you're describing, the experience of knowing that you were going to be late, of realizing it, but realizing it at a time when you didn't feel like you could take action, probably felt dysregulating and confusing even, because now you're trying to problem solve while also driving. So that makes sense to me because I know that you get overwhelmed in those situations. And given that once you're overwhelmed, you're not likely to then lean back into your agreements. You're likely to just manage. It makes sense to me that from there on out, you were just in like manage. And you're in your own way, white knuckling through the rest of the evening. And I can understand that you then wouldn't necessarily have, wanted to deal with any of this because getting caught or called out or noticed in times of being bad and trouble, that would touch all of your golden boy complex stuff. And that would bring up your idea that if you're not perfect, you won't be loved. And yeah. Does that feel like I'm hearing you?
It does. It feels, yeah, I feel good about how you're reflecting to me.
So what else do I need to know to understand your perspective?
Just that in all of that, with all of that said, I'm still totally on board with the original agreement. I don't want to change it.
Okay, so I'm hearing that you do want to be in the agreement, and you're not asking for a revision to the agreement itself.
No.
And that makes sense to me because I know that you're working really hard on self-accountability, on being in integrity with the agreements that you've made, even when it's hard, even when you're struggling to keep them.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move into empathizing now. And this can be really tricky when I feel like the harmed party.
Right.
This can be tricky. So depending on how intense it was, might need to really dig in and remember that I'm empathizing with your humanity. I'm empathizing with your experience, which is colored by your whole life and all the traumas that you've had and all the experiences you've had. I am not trying to agree with your position as in I would feel that way if I were you. I'm trying to allow myself to stand in your shoes and feel it from your perspective. So I can try out these sentence stems. I imagine that you felt scared as you started to notice that the time was just not going to speed up for you and somehow magically get you to where you needed to be, like that in fact you were just up against an unworkable situation. I imagine you were feeling scared. I also imagine that you were feeling, actually pretty intense guilt because of the pattern that you were starting to detect in yourself. And I also imagine that you were feeling overwhelmed, thinking that we would have to have this conversation. That in all likelihood, I was going to bring this back up to you. And we would be in one of these dialogues. And that all of those feelings were probably present all at once, even before you got home. Is that how you felt?
Yeah.
Is there more that you feel?
So I think something I haven't touched on is the panic that comes on the heels of all that. I felt overwhelmed. And you mentioned the golden boy thing. So there's a panic that, oh no, if I'm seen this way, that I won't be loved. And so there's this really young, very irrational part of me that panics. I don't panic well. And so it makes the prospect of the conversation very hard because that panicking one feels completely incapable of having the conversation. So the conversation then looms.
So I'm hearing that you felt the panic rise, and that when the panic rose, you maybe some of your avoidant strategies and tendencies showed up.
Right, because that irrational one uses those a lot.
Okay.
But not to get off topic.
Is there more?
No.
Okay.
No, that's...
So at the close of that, so we dialogued with me as the speaker, then we dialogued with you as the speaker. I'm going to request that we switch back again because I have one more piece to add.
All right.
This doesn't always happen, but I do have another piece to add.
Okay.
So can you handle that?
I'll just do a little quick regulation. I'm ready.
Okay. So there's one more piece to it that I wasn't aware of, but last night I was also aware as I got into the shower, I was very aware of the fact that it was likely going to be me who needed to bring this conversation up and do the emotional labor. And I felt that, and then it was true. That's how I experienced it. Was you came home and I felt you come to greet me, and I felt the tension, and I didn't want to fight, and I felt hope in a moment. There was a moment where I felt hope that you would address it right then. But we didn't. I didn't, and you didn't, and I felt like then the emotional labor of, oh, if we're going to dialogue in a structured, healthy way about this, like, I'm going to have to do it.
So,
and I felt a way about that.
I hear you saying that with everything else that you were feeling, you felt the need to be the relationship administrator, to take on the emotional labor of addressing this directly, rather than either ignoring it or pushing it down the road or having it come up some other way. You felt that it was going to fall to you, and then it did. Which, okay, am I getting that right?
Yeah. And that brings me into a place of anger and frustration and like systemic level. Like then it brings me up out of my stuff and into my systemic level frustration about the asymmetry in not just our agreement, but so many people's agreements that I see where one person, one or the other, does that emotional management and caretaking and like handles that, or at the very least initiates over and over again. I was feeling all of that.
Okay, so I hear you saying that your experience of this started at the level that the two of us are, this individual relational level, and then expanded to fit the pattern of our behavior and then the pattern of our cultural behavior and our participation in that very unfair, asymmetric fact of our... Okay.
When you mirrored that, I felt like, So yes, I hear that you understand me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there more?
No, that, like, I felt my body received that and felt seen.
All right.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything more from my side. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So I skipped a step.
Go ahead and skip through it. Like you'll walk
We'll go right through. So
step 2 and 3.
That makes sense to me because we've had conversations about the asymmetry in our relationship and in the world and how that feels for you and everybody. And so I can understand that you would get angry and given that. Does that feel like I'm hearing you?
It does. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for this additional piece because I feel much more complete. Something felt incomplete and now I feel, that feels good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you, so I can imagine that just like magnified everything else.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. And so I imagine you might have felt, well, again, hopeless because this is such a huge aspect of our culture. And if we can't deal with it directly ourselves in our little microcosm, then that sounds, I imagine that was very draining and sad and angering.
Yeah, I felt the anger. And I felt the anger.
Felt?
I also felt the deep disappointment of being in the shower and knowing that there was a moment I could almost hear the clock, my internal clock ticking. Like, oh, there's a moment here. There's a moment. Is he gonna step into the moment and address this right now? And I could feel it slip away. And I felt this like whoosh. I felt the disappointment of, oh, no, I'll have to do this. I'll have to bear this. So burdened. I felt burdened. I felt like I was handed homework to initiate this conversation and to take that on.
So I imagine you felt like you handed homework for something that you didn't manufacture. This wasn't your doing at all.
Yeah.
And so you were asked to take care of someone else's work for them. And that sounds very unfair.
That is how it felt. It felt unfair. And and I appreciate that you apologized before the switch. I appreciate that you grabbed onto it and you followed the first, couple steps of the apology ladder. And to move forward, I feel like a full apology and accountability ladder process would help us make a new like move through this, because the apology and accountability process is where I usually feel like you get it, and I'm like, not only does he hear me, but also he's willing to take steps to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Which is
what are you going to do? That's not mine. That I'm not going to manage this for you.
That you're not going to manage
I'm requesting, can we do an apology and accountability process?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So first of all, I'm very sorry. I'm sorry for not having used the tools that I could have to make sure that I did something that I'm not very good at.
Yeah.
And I know I need alarms and tools and reminders for myself to make sure when dealing with time that I deal with it well, and then that I reach out and update you with what's going on. I'm very sorry that I didn't do those things.
So you hit step 1, you said you're sorry. Step 2, you name what it was that happened. And step 3, like, why was it
Step
bad?
3 was it was bad.
Yeah, like why?
So I have a question for you. So the apology and accountability ladders, much of that is like folded into
Yeah,
here.
folded in. So I think of this as just sort of walking through to get to step 4, where you tell me, how are you going to prevent it from happening again?
So just like a quick recap, because we've been into the details, but I'm sorry that I was late and didn't contact you, and that you felt lost and hopeless and burdened and angry. And to prevent it in the future, which is what my original goal was, is to keep this from happening again and maintain the agreement. I will add the alarms to my phone before I leave. Knowing what time I'm supposed to be home, I know what times I would need to leave, and I can set alarms at that time and before. That's what I do with appointments. So yes, I'll have appointments on my phone set up so that when I leave, if part of me decides to try to sabotage me, I have a backup to say, to remind me of my agreement.
Thank you. That does help. And I appreciate that effort. I still feel nervous about it, but thanks.
One other thing that I will do is I will find accountability buddies. Because it occurred to me that, I'll show you my phone before I leave. No, that's putting the burden on you again to say, look, here's what I'm doing. No, but I have other people in my life that I can do that with. It also
leans into that golden boy tendency of like wanting me to now give you a gold star for being a regular, decent human who upholds your own agreement that you made. Like that's not right.
But I can have other people help me.
Yeah.
Again, I can ask for help.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that you said at the outset that you didn't want a change to our agreement. And I'm going to say that given what you've just said, I don't need a change to our agreement either. I would like to uphold, we have a current, what we call an MVA, a minimum viable agreement, which is a particular process that I teach inside the year of opening. And we still use them to this day as part of our agreements. We actually have 3 phases of agreement, but though that is a part. So I would like to keep that in place so that you have time to, put some of these steps into action and see how they work. I don't want to try to shift the agreement. I instead would like to give you the time to see. So let's stay in this agreement.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Because this agreement process is supposed to be about a month, right? So we got a month left.
Yeah.
So let's stay in it and see how the results are. We'll review when we review our agreement.
Thank you.